Well, hello, Internet! Welcome to episode number 302 of the Comic Watchers Show. He is Chad, I'm Matt, and this is our crazy little show where we talk about comics and all kinds of manner of things. So,
Hold on,
Chad,
we're talking about comics tonight.
yes,
No,
we are talking about comics. The long march to 400 continues.
Wow.
I know! It's crazy. Seems like just yesterday we were on episode 301. So, our guest this week is creator John Westhoff, and he's going to talk to us about his and Dan Dougherty's comic, The Drumsticks of Doom, which is now in its final funding lap on Kickstarter. So, John, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk comics, whether they're my own or other people's that they've made. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, the long road to the final arc is finally here for Drumsticks of Doom, and we're bringing the encore to an end.
That's amazing. So I myself have only read the first issue. So break it down, just like how much Drumsticks of Doom is there to be ingested?
Currently, there are 7 issues and a mini comic spinoff from one of our characters in it. And there will be 10 issues total. So the final 3-issue arc, we're actually launching it all together. Since we have an awesome partnership with Massive Indies to publish through comic shops, we have a little bit less stress to get every book on Kickstarter. So we're going to try to launch the whole arc at once. Everybody can get all the issues that they want, all the variants they want. And then we can move on to getting it into retailers' hands later this year.
I love that. Chad, don't you love that?
oh, I love that. And I was just, I was trying to think. It was recently that John and I talked when he was doing another project. Was it something to do with this one? I can't remember. I see a lot of crowdfunders.
Yeah, it's all right. There's a ton of us out there, but yeah, we just wrapped the mini comic for our sidekick character in the book is Argyle the Arachnigator. He's a spider alligator hybrid, so we gave him his own little book. He's been one of the characters that's really taken off from the book. Everybody loves Argyle, so we gave him his own little mini story while we were getting the final arc ready. We just wrapped that up on Kickstarter just this last week.
So kind of, I know we've talked about this before, but what is the premise of the story and where are the influences that made you come up with the story?
Well, Drumsticks of Doom, the short pitch is, in a world where Black Sabbath became the most popular band instead of the Beatles, the universe has changed forever. Heavy metal rules the earth like it should be. But in our universe, our main character, Lana, she just wants to make her independent music in a heavy metal world when she's thrust into a war to keep heavy metal on the top of the charts. So that's kind of where the book starts. And you guys, we sent over issue 1. That's kind of where it starts, where she finds a magical pair of drumsticks. And again, she's thrust into this war with the powers of heavy metal. Because even though I am a huge heavy metal fan, that's the big inspiration really was, I love things like Magic the Gathering and other things that pull from like Tolkien and all, tons of heavy metal songs do that too. It's like, we love elves and dragons and stuff. But I thought to myself, heavy metal itself has its own lore to it. So to me, the songs of heavy metal, the lyrics about, the man on the silver mountain and the rainbow in the dark and all these awesome songs, heavy metal itself has this lore to it. Well, what if, all the things our grandmas and our aunties told us in the 80s would happen if we listen to heavy metal actually happen, but the world still rolled on, right? There's demons around, there's werewolves, there's magic, but it's kind of a little bit more grounded than that. It's not as over the top as something like a Metalocalypse. But I just love the lore of heavy metal songs and just the of all the characters that are involved in heavy metal, like Ozzy and Dio and all these characters. I just said, let's put them into a book and kind of, this is my love letter to comics and heavy metal kind of rolled into one.
You sound as if you love heavy metal and comics almost as much as I do, which is saying a lot. And we're definitely going to get into that. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on those subjects in a little bit more depth. But tell us, if you would, about your own background with comics. Like, how did you get into them and discover them as a young lad? And what are some of your touchstones as a reader?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a grandparent who read comics, Richie Rich and Betty Boop and stuff like that when she was young. So we were with her one day, and there just happened to be a comic shop close to her work. She said, "Oh, let's bring the boys in." We were 10 or 11 years old. I believe the first comic I'm pretty sure I picked up off the shelf was Amazing Spider-Man 332, where Venom's kind of jumping at the cover, and I was hooked ever since. That was just like that. Thankfully, Grandma and my mom took me back every couple of weeks, from then until I was, got a driver's license and found cars and kind of dipped in and out. But I've pretty much been a lifelong reader with some lapses since then. So thanks, Grandma, for that. A lot of people snub their nose at comics. She did not. She said, "Hey, if you guys want to read it, you can do some chores. We can help you get some comic books." So that was my start in comics. But I never really wanted to create comics. It was actually my older brother, whose steps I followed in as a drummer. We were close growing up, and he was always the one. He had the all white, books you can buy at like Michael's or whatever, where you can make your own story. He was the one drawing characters, and he did his Youngblood knockoffs and all these stories. I was just happy to like read them and say, "Oh, that's cool." I never really thought about it until, I've been in a band since I was 14 or 15 years old. Started to get older, getting ready to have a family. That part of your life, that creative part of your life, is winding down a little bit. And I said, I met some of these awesome people online, and they're all making comic books, and it seems like, it might be something cool to do. So I just kind of threw it up on this thing called a message board. If you young kids don't know what that was back in the day.
No, they don't know about the chatty rooms either.
The internet
was it CompuServe?
I don't actually know where it was hosted, but it was the wonderful 11 o'clock comics podcast. I met a bunch of friends there, put a post up and said, "Hey, I want to try to write my own comic. Will anybody draw it?" A poor soul named Bob Gore-Ornelas, he answered the call, and we started working together, and we've worked together ever since, 15 or 16 years now. So I was very fortunate to find great people to collaborate with early on, and that's kind of what I just kept doing it. Again, I kind of lost that creative outlet in music, and ironically, I was getting out of music, got into comics, and now, as some of my comic runs are kind of winding down, I actually just started a band a couple weeks ago. So
awesome.
It's come back full circle.
So you've talked about the inspirations, but where is the story? Does this campaign pick up the story? I know you said it's getting ready to wrap up.
Yeah, it was distinctly, we kind of had a bigger idea in mind. You never know how much support you're going to get, how long a series is going to go. But I had an idea of 3 arcs. You get the band together, first arc, second arc, you record an album, third arc, you go on tour. And that's where we're at now. Not too many spoilers for those who've been following the series. Some huge events have happened to get us to this point. So of course we want you to still read and enjoy those character moments, but we're about to head out on the world tour. And it's at this point, we see who's going to make it through to the encore, right? Who's going to make it through. And again, I was never in like a huge band. I never toured or anything like that. But again, just kind of having a fascination with bands and all that. As a lover of heavy metal, you also know some of the warts that come with it, right? So a lot of that's in the book too. As much as it's a love letter, we're also talking about, people gatekeeping communities and people who negatively live in that world of heavy metal. And again, in this kind of over-the-top farcical world, it's even worse, where they're literally trying to control, what music is played and things like that. Because even a great thing like heavy metal can get out of control in the wrong hands.
Sure. Look at what happened in Norway in the early 90s with the black metal scene.
There you go.
So, we don't want any murder to happen in our world.
So when you think of heavy metal, you think more guitars. What was there a reason why you picked, the drumsticks being the magical item and driving the story?
So the actual title for the book is a riff on a Manowar song, because it originally started as what if Manowar lyrics were real. And if anybody's listened to Manowar, you know they're very, you know, medieval, over the top, sword and sorcery. You know, my broadsword fighting.
Men in loincloths.
Men in loincloths. So the first thing was like kind of a funny pitch, right? Like, oh, we're just going to make it like over the top. And they have a song called Drums of Doom. And it's one day I just said to myself, oh, drumsticks of doom. And then I kind of thinking about, well, a drumstick is kind of like a wand, right? Well, what would that look like? And then the story just kind of took off from there. And once, shortly thereafter, I got the idea of, oh, that all happened because Black Sabbath opened the gateway to hell and they became the biggest band. So once I kind of had that hook, I was like, okay, now we have a bigger story that's not just, haha, you know, these are Manowar lyrics and everybody on motorcycles and loincloths. Oh, we actually can have a story here. And then I thought to myself, what is it about music that I love? And that is being in bands, writing music, recording music. So I said, where is our character at in this story? And that's where kind of Lana came in as somebody who doesn't really fit in that world. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like I don't either. I feel like I have amazing friends. I've grown up. They've never judged us on music, but I think all of us have kind of had eclectic tastes. So you kind of say to yourself, you know, am I a metalhead? If I'm listening to, you know, pop songs, am I truly a metalhead? And again, I never got judged for that, but I know other people have, right? You have to be, it's metal all the time. It has to sound like crap and sound like it was recorded on, you know, on a tin can inside of a, you know, a garbage can or something like that. You get people who are very elitist about it. And so I kind of took that idea and created the character of Lana of, she plays heavy metal. She likes heavy metal, but what she really wants to do is make what we would call pop music, but in this world, you know, is independent music.
There's an interesting thread there, I think, in that, you know, heavy metal in and of itself started off on the fringe. And, you know, by the time the 80s came along, it became its own scene, its own thing, and started having all of its own little spin-offs, you know, the doom, death metal, black metal, et cetera, et cetera. And but at the beginning in the 70s, it was definitely like this weird new niche thing. Mm-hmm. And I like this idea that pop in this world is the weird niche thing. Like, you don't tend to think of that because pop is so ubiquitous everywhere, but I think that's a pretty clever spin on musical gatekeeping, as it were, and who gets to say what's popular and what's not.
And we definitely have characters and references in the book, like, you know, bands like Rush never took off because they were a little bit more, prog rock, and, people like Prince never really got their shot because, again, that's not really what was topping the charts. And there's a lot. I wish we could have done more, to be honest with you, but I did at some point have to say, okay, we don't have 100 issues to tell this story. We can't go off on too many tangents. We got to stay to the focus. And then if the readership is there, there's all kinds of things we could do in this universe and kind of get around to it, you know?
Speaking, so who are some of the other characters, you know, that are in the universe? I know you mentioned that you just finished crowdfunding the Alligator, the Argyle, or
that's him. Argyle is our hybrid. Again, in this kind of world, there's a lot of experimentation and magic and other things like that. So these hybrid creatures are running around. There's Jerry, our werewolf bass player. They call him a day wolf because he doesn't require the moon to change. There's Jimmy. He's just the drummer. A lot of me is in Jimmy. You know, he's just the guy who wants to show up and be helpful. He's kind of a little bit up there in age, so he's kind of getting. He's only in Lana's band because, you know, that's kind of just always what he's done for, you know, the last 30 years of his life. Again, a little bit of myself in there. So that's kind of the main band, you know, a 3-piece. I'm a huge fan of 3 pieces, power trios, that kind of stuff. So the main band is just the 3 characters. And then, of course, Argyle, the Arachnigator, their sidekick for protection. But then we have ex-band members that come back into the fold. Lana's ex-boyfriend, who she was in a band with to start the book, breaks off from the band, but then he comes back as he's kind of siding with these supernatural powers in heavy metal. So you have to read to see how he kind of plays into it. And he kind of represents that more stricter side of metal, that, you know, long hair in their face. And yes, it's got to be, you know, played to 11 and nothing else.
So tell us a little bit more about the rest of the creative team. Who are you working with, and how did you get connected with them?
Well, even though I love the power trio, as I mentioned, this is a duo. This is just two of us. Dan Doherty is my co-creator on the book. He was somebody that I met through friends in comics, and we worked on an anthology called Banthology, which we kind of noticed that we had so many creators that were also in bands or used to be in bands, and Dan is a working musician to this day. He did an amazing story called The Beast in Me. It was this beautiful black and white story about the time he played his biggest gig, I believe at the Metro in Chicago. And he kind of always had this beast in his ear, this kind of thing that was saying, that's what you want to do. You want to hear the audience roar and you want to play these bigger shows, and how you can never really shake that as a musician once you kind of get a taste of it. And I just thought it was such a great story. It stuck with me so much. And then I became friends with Dan after that. For years, we talked and met at conventions and all kinds of stuff. And I had this idea, this music comic. And I came in and out of comics writing and got frustrated with a lot of things. And finally I said, I'm going to give it one last go. I'm going to approach Dan. And Dan's like, of course, John, we've been friends now for like a decade. Of course I want to work on this comic with you. Like, why did you wait to tell me? I'm like, I don't know, because we're weird. So Dan Doherty was brought in from the beginning, and he's been my co-creator ever since. We split everything down the middle as far as the book. We bring in other friends that are also, a lot of them also musicians to do covers and pinups, but really it's Dan and I, and artist Ryan Vella out of Australia, who's also a musician. Check out his band Viper Syndicate. He's done some additional pages when Dan, we needed some kind of different artistic perspective in the book, but really it's just been Dan and I for all 7 issues so far.
So how has do you feel that you've, progressed from issue 1 to now?
Boy, it's changed so much. It started, I had the idea of a story, but time and, full-time jobs and stuff like that. I never really sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write out all 12 scripts, but I had an idea of an arc I wanted. But every time Dan turns in pages, he draws certain characters a certain way. And I'm like, oh, they have to have a bigger part. And oh, this person looks great. And, just the personality he gives to it. It's changed so much from the ideas that I had at issue 1. Again, I think we're kind of still heading towards that ultimate arc that I had in, but there's been so many fun like tangents along the way. And again, characters that the original pitch to Dan was 8 pages, and we were going to pitch it to comic companies and see if people were interested. And just characters within those first 8 pages became a huge part of the story again, because Dan is such a great illustrator. I'm so fortunate to have him as a partner in the book, because not only is he a great illustrator, he's also, again, a working musician, singer, songwriter, guitar player. So he kind of knows not just how to draw the physical guitar, but how people would hold it and how they would, talk to their bandmates during a live show, and all these things that, you can't get unless you're also a musician has been so important to the book. I think the book, it would be completely different without him. So it's changed so much from issue 1. And I think with each issue, I think it gets better and better as far as the characters and, our investment in them.
How do you feel you've grown as a writer?
Well, I have one other series that was longer than this. It was called Hellbillies, about hillbilly monster hunters. But other than that, this is the longest thing I've ever written. Really, Hellbillies was a web comic, and it was shorter issues. This has been the longest thing, and I hope at least that I've grown through the process, because a lot of us in indie comics like to say, oh, I could write Spider-Man, or I could write this, or I could do this better than. But if you really haven't invested and taken a series, a big arc with characters, multiple arcs in this case, I don't think you kind of know where you're at as a writer. And it's been a very satisfying process for me. If this is, the pinnacle of the mountain for me, this series is the longest I write, then I'd be very happy, with kind of where it's at.
Makes sense to me. So tell us more about some of the characters, like, and forgive me if I misspeak his name, but Gap, Gaap, the demon fellow, and how these demons interact with the world around them.
So I've kind of played with this idea before of like hell on earth, or mystical things happen. We have another series called Child Possession Services, which is like, what if demonic possessions were real and there had to be like a social service agency that worked with them? I'm very much into that. Like if you've ever read the comic Chew, where it's like, yes, there's this over the top thing happening, but again, life goes on. We still have to function. There's still,
don't worry, there's a bureaucracy.
Exactly. There's always a bureaucracy or a horribly run, government agency or whatever. And in this case, you still have the same, band dynamics and all that going on. You're still trying to do your everyday life. So really demons, again, we do kind of get into this in the last arc, but there's a reason why they crossed over when Black Sabbath played at a certain time. And again, it's different. It might not be as religious as people might associate with hell. There's kind of, something that happened that created this rift in the universe. And these demons came over with no real knowledge how they got here. And again, they had to kind of pick up and say, okay, we just have to go on. And of course, what actually ends up happening is, we as humans, of course, don't accept them as well. And we, even though they're around, we treat them differently or they feel differently just because they kind of stick out. And Gop is kind of one of the characters that he's a demon who's accepted that. He said, you know what? I'm a demon. I love heavy metal. I'm going to start a heavy metal club. And that's where Lana and her band are playing in the first issue on the first arc. And Gop, again, is another one who didn't have as huge of a part, but just Dan's awesome designs of him with very limited feedback from me. He kind of always comes up with these just amazing, just fully developed characters just in their expressions and how they look. And it's just amazing every time he turns in a page.
And did I also see that Dave Sharp is contributes to the project?
No, I actually don't know Dave. We've had quite an amazing slew of guest cover artists. Maria Wolf did the first cover. We've had Mike Norton's doing a cover for us. We've had a ton of awesome people that have contributed.
Maybe I just missed the name, or sorry, I thought I saw the.
We're on 20 something different covers with variants and everything, so it's hard to keep, even for me to keep track of who worked on what book. And I also did 5 Kickstarters for 5 different books last year, so I'm always got a lot of different projects in the air.
Speaking on that, tell us about your crowdfunding experience, because I know you've done Kickstarter, and Drumsticks of Doom was also on Zoop once, if I'm correct.
Yeah, we tried.
Hopefully, I'm not wrong on that.
No, you got that one
everything right. Now.
That one you got right. We've primarily been a Kickstarter company. We couldn't be here without our Kickstarter support. I was fortunate to be one of the early creators who used Kickstarter when it first kind of started in the late 2000s there. So I've always been comfortable with using it and kind of evolved with it. And again, we wouldn't be here at all without its support. But we've tried some other things. We've done some Indiegogos, some Zoop we've tried. But Kickstarter is where we really get a lot of our core audience. They want to back where they're comfortable and with. So we're primarily, Kickstarter from here on out. But again, I couldn't do it without it. Do I always think that they're maintaining the site the way they should, or doing what they should to kind of update things? I think they're a little bit behind other sites as far as user friendliness and that, but still, I think it's good for creators. They have such an ecosystem of backers within it that there's so many people that go on Kickstarter and search for books. It's just, you have to be there as an indie creator these days.
Well, have you noticed anything different with the way your campaigns have done, or how they've how the funding process has gone? I know that most creators who I talk to say there's a big jump at the beginning, it kind of bottoms out, and then there's a big jump at the end, and that in between is having a heart attack.
Yeah, and that's the phase we're at right now, is kind of getting those followers. That's what helps with that big bump at the beginning. They give you notification to the 100 people who followed, a bunch of them back, and then at the end they give a little more notification. They come back, and the middle is, like you said, just kind of screaming at the void and trying to. It's changed. It used to be, people when it first came out, it was very exciting for people. 15 or so years ago. We used to get funded almost every project within the first 48 hours, about sometimes a little bit after. People were excited. It was different. It was new. It was a way to support their friends or find books they liked. And that changed over the next decade. I think as some projects didn't fulfill, or people got a sour taste, or, they kind of had the experience of supporting somebody and maybe just said, I'll get it if it comes to the local shop. Yeah. But then it kind of came back with, the post-COVID world. People were excited to get their projects out. That's kind of, I had actually planned to start the company back in 2019, and then oops, bad time to do that. But still, those first couple years, people were excited to support each other. You know what? We've all just gotten through a really tough time. You know, it was just a lot of that. And now it's kind of that excitement's died down a little bit. I will say, in the 15 or 16 years I've been doing it, now is probably the toughest time to be on crowdfunding, especially for my peers that are newer creators. It's very difficult to get people away from other sites to click your link and go in there. It's just been tough. All the social media sites now are just, they used to be great. You could post on Twitter and 10 people would find it there and share it out and go to your thing. Now it's like the algorithm just pushes everything down. All the meta sites, if you post a link, you're shadow banned for, you know, the entirety of your campaign. Only the people that you follow the most will see it. There's a lot of issues right now with getting the word out. Now, that's not to say, you know, we still have had success, but it's been a lot harder. The grind has been a lot more. You have to be very intentional with what you do, like, you know, going on great shows like yours, you know, sending out your message lists, doing all kinds of things rather than just, I launched my Kickstarter and it'll kind of roll through its evolution with a couple, you know, social media posts. For me, you really got to just be on it all the time.
I've noticed that you're, you know, pretty involved with the online, you know, indie creators on like Facebook and stuff. What are your feelings of, you know, being a part of that crowd?
I mean, that's really the reason I do it, is to make friends and meet people like you guys. And I'm not trying to be facetious when I say that. If this is the best it is for me, then I'm fine with that. You have to enjoy the path that you're on along the way. You can't always be like, oh, you know, this guy has 500 backers. I've only got, you know, 250. You know, this, you have to enjoy the entire process. And I tried to do that. At first, when I was first starting out, I would get frustrated when we wouldn't have a comic fund, or, you know, why are we not growing readership? And now, you know, I just kind of take it day by day. I'm fortunate to say that because my wife is gainfully employed. I'm gainfully employed. So I also don't require, you know, I don't rely on this as for my income. Not everybody can say that. So for me, it's just something I enjoy. And if something, you know, we get some sales and it, you know, we end up, you know, I don't know, supersizing our McDonald's from the profits we get from these books, then that's great. But otherwise, I'm just enjoying the process. And part of that is being part of the indie community. So many people helped me when I first started out that I want to be in that role now. When people have questions, I want to answer them. When people need help, I want to help them, because I just really enjoy the indie community. It's different than a lot of other places, right? It's not like music. It's not like making movies. You know, you're one or two steps away from, you know, your heroes like Jeff Lemire and all these other guys out there who you admire. It's just such a small, tight-knit community that I enjoy it. I maybe am on social media a little too much incessantly, you know, but I still enjoy that part of it. I enjoy meeting new people, helping new people, all that stuff. So I think it's a great community. Sans a couple knuckleheads, but that's okay.
You kind of mentioned it, but how is it finding a balance between family, work, and, you know, this, you know, other part of your, you know, creative life?
I think it's difficult. And if I have any success, it's that I'm just a distracted person. I'm kind of used to that. So I can kind of, you know, oh, I got to update the Kickstarter here. Oh, I got to ship this package out. I'm used to managing lots of things at once. And I kind of like that kind of little bit of chaos in my life. It kind of keeps things exciting and keeps you going through the day. But it does get more difficult. I did not realize, you know, as I was planning my kind of comeback into comics, I was also feeling the mortality of reaching age 40. And boy, did I, you know, the energy, the times when you could stay up from 9 till midnight lettering that comic and still go to work the next day are long over. So I was not ready for that part is slowly dwindling, and that leaves less time, right? Because when you used to have 2 or 3 hours in the evening after the kids went to bed, and you still, you know, again, you could get 6 hours of sleep and go to work. It was a lot easier to get things out. And I've been finding myself having to adjust and set realistic limits and say, okay, you know, you have an hour a day, probably at max, to work on comics outside of work and family time. So be intentional with it. Try not to sit there on your phone while you're doing it. On the weekends, maybe you have a little more time, but you have to be considerate of that, because you have a lot of different priorities. And you have to be intentional with your time, or you'll end up not completing what you need to and putting projects off.
Well, and you have to be able to not only be present for your family and your job, but for yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just live this whole live for the grind thing. I'm so sick of hearing about it.
For sure.
Bullshit.
For sure. And I'm very
fun.
fortunate. I work from home and I have a flexible job. So, I can, do some mail, run to the post office on my lunch break, or wake up a little early to finish a project before I start and adjust my time. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. I know not everybody is, but there's a reason why the company I have is Part-Time Comics. That's the company I run. It's just a veiled, name for publishing my own books. But I chose that name purposely because I knew before that I was taking on a full-time workload as a publisher, writer, letterer, everything else in my previous company, Kingbone Press. And this time I said, you know what, I'm going to come back and just do what I can. If I get 1 book out a year, 2 books, just be happy with that. You can't at this point in your life, it's too difficult. Of course, I didn't stick to my own rules and ended up doing like 5 Kickstarters a year, but I tried at least. I tried to set the limits so that I'm not again, I'm not feeling, guilty or frustrated for lacking on other things. I'm just doing what I can realistically. So that's kind of where the name Part-Time Comics came from, is that, I just wanted to be kind of my part-time gig. And I find more enjoyment with that than having to, do 40 hours of work and then do 40 hours of work with this. I like this to be enjoyable.
Oh, sure. You don't want to hate it.
Right.
And eventually with a schedule like that or something similar, resentment does grow.
For sure. And I definitely got to that point around 2018. We had a bad convention. One of our only traveling conventions, the Heroes Con. And I'd really just left that. And I knew that was my time to step away and say, at that time with the other company, I was publishing a lot of other people's books and kind of, I don't think they ever put pressure on me, but I felt like I wanted to take on their book and get all these sales and help them launch their Kickstarters. And I feel like we reached some of our goals, but I felt like I did too much. So selfishly, when I came back, I said, okay, this time around I can help people, but I can't necessarily take on their projects, help them get to print, run their Kickstarters. I have to be a little selfish this time around. And then if down the road something changes and I can work, with other people on their projects, I still would love to do that. And I've been part of several awesome anthologies with that in mind. But again, for now, Part-Time Comics is again just a vanity name for my own titles, just trying to get them out there.
So as a comic creator, and I believe you said you're in a band, does your love of music influence your comic book, creativity, or vice versa? Does, what you do for comic books help you with your music?
The more I've been asked this question a few times, and I feel like the more I reflect on it, the more I think part of what being in a band sets you up to is to collaborate on a creative project and understand that we all have strengths in that project, and you have to let other people, their strengths sing, whether that's writing less in your script so that your artists have room, or telling your artist, if you need an extra page because you want to extend this fight scene, you do that. Colorist, this page didn't necessarily vibe exactly how I liked, but I'm going to trust your vision and talk to me about what you're seeing. It helps you with that creative process because, again, I play drums. I'm very little bass and guitar. I can, I can't really sing. So I have to let go of that and say, okay, this is your part of this project. And again, it's the same thing with comics. I have to let the artists do what they're great at. Colorists we've worked with. I do letter my own book, so I get to do that as well. But we all have to, we work together, and we should be able to give each other influence to come up with a better whole. But you also have to understand when you're not the one in the driver's seat of that part of the project. If you want someone invested in it, then you got to let them, spread their wings and do what they can bring to the table.
Yeah. Everybody brings something to the table, even the drummer.
A little bit, barely.
So let's talk about heavy metal now, because I just adore talking about heavy metal. And Chad, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna bring you along for the ride. How did you get into heavy music? And what were some of your early bands that influenced your tastes?
I mentioned it earlier, but a huge influence on me growing up. I have a brother who's about 13 months older than me. He was a huge influence. He would always bring home the newest, the coolest bands. He started going to shows and gigs before I did, so that was a huge part of it. I also just happened to have friends. You know what? I had friends who had older brothers and siblings as well, so they were like, "Oh, Ozzy Osbourne," and "Oh, have you heard White Zombie?" And that was kind of my gateway into it. My first favorite band was Tool. So I just remember hearing their, music on the radio, and it was like, oh, this is just such a unique sound and so cool. And so that was bands like that. And then my favorite band actually is Primus. So maybe not heavy metal, but definitely got to a point where, okay, I've listened to Soundgarden and I love Nirvana and I love Tool. But then when you're around friends and a sibling that's just so into music and just listening to so much, you eventually are like, what's the weirdest crap there is out there? So bands like War and Primus and System of a Down and all those bands that were very left of center, I just really came to enjoy those. And those became a big influence on me. I like the music that really stands out, where it's like, okay, these guys and gals got together and they made something only they can make. If you put 100 other musicians in a room, they could never come up with a sound like Primus, right? They're just so unique. Right. That's really, but even before that, my dad and my mom listen to music all the time. They love, CCR and Black Sabbath and rock music and stuff like that too. So, I have to feel like they were a big influence, but really it was my older brother, my friends, and just in 6th and 7th grade, we all found, alternative radio and heavy metal at the same time, and started picking up Megadeth and Metallica and all those albums from when I was 14 on,
I have to say that growing up in a musical household opens the door in its own way, right? Because I grew up in a musical household where both my parents would play piano or have the radio on, and my stepdad was very into the alternative scene as it was in grunge scene as it was happening, because I was there but a little too young to know how to explore myself. I was only like 11 or 12. And I like just having that access right there at a young age opens your mind and broadens your horizons already, and kind of just rewires you, I think.
I think so. I think there's people who love music, and then there's people who love music, right? The people who sit in their car for an extra, 5 minutes to let the song finish, and, the people that are always, humming a song or whatever like that. And for me, really, my mom, she wasn't a musician herself, but what she was is she had 2 sons who were like, we're super into music. We want to play guitar. I started with bass. She said, okay, I'm going to get you some gigs, mowing lawns for my friends. You can make some money. You can go get yourself a bass. Mm-hmm. And then she let all of our crappy ass bands play in her basement while she was probably upstairs plugging her ears. That's what she did. Maybe she didn't play herself, but she said, if you guys want to be in a band, I support it. I'll let you, hurt my ears for, an hour a week, whatever. Even now, she actually moved in with me as an elderly person. And now she said it was funny that, she's like, I got you out of my house so I didn't have to listen to your band. And now you started a band again. I'm like, it never ends. It's your fault. You're the one who did it.
You open that door.
Yeah. So that was really how I was, I had a stepfather around. He was very into music too. So he always had good music on, but it was really my mom. She was really a single mom for most of my time as a youth. My dad wasn't around. So she was the one who encouraged us in that way. And if she hadn't done that, again, I'd be a completely different person. I made so many connections, and we were the kind of kids in high school. As soon as we had a job, it was at least a concert a week, sometimes 2, sometimes more than that, going to the VFW, seeing this local band. We were just constantly at shows. That's just the kind of friend group that I had. And again, that started because, my mother, promoted our love of music.
That is awesome. And it's so great that you had a parent, or parents really, that were so supportive and like-minded and understood the value of it.
My parents wouldn't let me listen to pop radio.
Wow.
Oh no. My best friend growing up, like his parents saw Satan everywhere, and
Oh yeah.
so that was like because we were kids in the '80s during the Satanic Panic.
Yeah. And it's so funny to hear about it because I wasn't aware of it. Like I didn't my aunts and uncles and my grandparents were, I would consider religious people, but they just didn't project that vibe. So when I heard about it, like later, seeing things on MTV, like about the Satanic Panic, and I was like, well, I was alive then, but I don't remember, but I just had a nurturing group instead of the opposite,
Yeah. Like I would hang out with him, and his parents would be all like, "You can't read those Ghost Rider comics; they're satanic.
Lord.
You can't listen to these bands; they're satanic. Blah blah blah, satanic." And
You can't play Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, Magic the Gathering.
Totally verboten. And so, of course, that pushed us towards that stuff.
Right.
Because that's just human nature, especially if you're a rebellious kid. And I don't know. It's just funny how things like that work out.
Yeah, we lived through very interesting times there in the 80s and early 90s.
Absolutely.
And now, like you said, it's so weird to see it, just so popular, and it's accepting now. So
Back in the days when MTV when MTV existed and played music videos.
huge part of my childhood.
So I don't know where Matt dropped off to, but oh, there he is. Do we want to kind of get into the other part of the show that we kind of talked about?
Yes, I think we should.
All right. So Matt's topic was top 5 comic book runs. So who wants to go first with number 5?
Well, I'm glad you guys brought up this subject. Again, the commonality between us all is comics, right? That's the reason we're here. You guys have a show and everything. And again, you talk about heavy metal and that being part of your life. Again, I just think if you're a comic lover, we're just a different breed, right? We just have this.
Absolutely.
We don't just read, a comic every, once a month we find at 7-Eleven. We were the collectors, and you see, I got shelves and shelves behind me. I tried not to look through the shelves after you posed this question. I said, go with what pops in your head.
Yeah.
And I am not a rereader. I will tell you that. There's so many comics to read that I very often go back to a run. But the one that came to mind right away that I've read at least 3 times is Alan Moore, Stephen Bissett's Swamp Thing. And John Totalbaum, I should not say John Totalbaum, huge part of it. Those men together, I don't know. I was always a Marvel guy growing up. That just what I could afford on my budget was Spider-Man, and I kind of stayed in that universe mostly. Just never really branched into DC. But I had some great friends, growing up in my mid-20s, and as I started to branch out, and they said, "I read this." And Swamp Thing is one of the ones that I go back to. I was like, I don't know. This is probably overhyped. That movie I saw in the 80s was terrible. And that's one of the ones. There's something about that book. It's just, how did it even get made? It's just a very, quirky, bizarre character. And Moore just writes a great story with, and it's just this love story, really. And that's one of the few ones. I have the Absolute editions. I love to go back to it every couple of years. That was the first one that popped to mind when you guys posed the question.
Cannot go wrong with that. The Moore Swamp Thing, it's number 6 in my top 10, and the only reason that it's not in the top 5 is I don't feel the affinity personally for the main character that I do the main characters in my top 5. So it's just like, in terms of a work itself and a work of quality and his historical significance, of course I love it.
I mean, I feel like I can identify to a giant swamp monster. I just feel like he's as close to me in character as I can get.
So it goes.
Well, for me, it was kind of, it's kind of how I always grew up with comics, but it wasn't until the Nightfall storyline that I was looking through the paper one day, and one of the articles like, "Oh, Batman! There's going to be a new Batman." And I remember riding my bike down to the grocery store, that very day, and picking up the first issue of Nightfall, and from then it was, game on.
Wow.
Absolutely. Okay, so my number 5 would actually be Doom Patrol by Grant Morrison and Richard Case. Just a beautiful work. It's really about people that are damaged in some way, shape, or form, but they still have good hearts and they still do good things. And man, it's just beautifully weird. Like, I think it's the Ne Plus Ultra of Grant Morrison comics, if you had to put me to it. And I just love that run just about more than anything, which is why it's at number 5 in my top 5.
Nice. I've heard great things. I've only read Lemire's Animal Man run. I gotta get to the Morrison one of these days.
Yes, you do. You owe it to yourself as a lover of comics.
And I didn't put these in any particular order, just kind of how they popped into my head. I tried to go with comic runs, not graphic novels or stuff like that. But the next one that came to mind is Fear Agent from Rick Remender, Tony Moore, Jerome Opeña. That's again another one when I thought to myself, what are the ones you go back to reread? And that's one that always pops out of my mind. Heath Houston himself is just that anti-hero, reluctant hero, whatever you want to call him, character, and it's just and Moore and Opeña's art throughout is just insane. And it's I've read a lot of Rick Remender since then, and I just always feel like I think Fear Agent was really where he was just hitting on all cylinders. I know there was a lot of delays and stuff, but you really can't feel it when you go back and reread it. You feel that he had this reverence for this character and this arc in the story. I think it's 36 issues when it wrapped up. So
I want to say there's an omnibus that's either just come out or it's coming out soon of the entire story.
There is 2 absolute editions, but yeah, maybe they finally did the whole.
I think it's all under one cover,
Nice.
at least coming soon. But I love Rick Remender. He is absolutely like not only a fantastic writer, but he seems to capture the voice of Generation X in a way that
For sure.
that I just hits me perfectly.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect thing with Generation X. Like, and we said Lovers of Music, like every arc in Fear Agent is a Minor Threat song. He uses Minor Threat songs for it. So there's all these subtle, music things that he does. Some even not subtle in other books he's done, but you can tell he's one of those lovers of music too.
Most definitely.
Well, since you've already mentioned Grant Morrison, and there was some his Animal Man run was also on my list because when I was getting as I got deeper into DC, and it's like, oh, I'm reading Crisis, and it's like, oh, Animal Man, he seems interesting, and then reading Morrison's run, he's such a almost an everyman, and it's. And then you get all the weird Morrison stuff that just makes it even more, interesting to read. And I mean, I like the Morrison run, but and there's some good stuff in the Vertigo Pete Milligan run, but it's the Morrison stuff that kind of, I like to go back and look at.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And that's another one. It's in my top 10, but not my top 5. So I have much, much love. Grant Morrison, they're actually my favorite writer, period, just per like sheer volume of comics that they've written that I love. So, I can dig that. My number 4 is, man, it's a tough one, but I got to say the Peter David's Incredible Hulk run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're getting into some stuff now. I just think that Peter David, one of our great writers, was hitting on all cylinders for the majority of this run. He worked with some incredible artists like Todd McFarlane and Dale Keown before he lost his mind, and Liam Sharp shows up for 10 issues. Gary Frank. And just the way that he seamlessly rewrote the mythos of the Hulk and turned him from just kind of a rage monster into a victim of child abuse, which I realize Bill Mantlo is the one that initially came up with that conceit, but Peter David actually just like really took it and ran with it. But Just a gorgeous run from start to finish. And I've got a Dale Keown Hulk tattooed on my leg to prove my love.
It's a good one.
Yeah, most definitely.
Nothing like a Dale Keown Hulk, that's for sure.
No, nothing. So, all right, John, we're back to you.
You mentioned like Grant Morrison being, one of your favorites. For me, my favorite writer is Ed Brubaker. And I was like, well, he has to be in here somewhere, right? Again, I tried not to overthink it and said, what comes to mind? But he's got a lot of I guess you could say Criminals a run, but it's more, graphic novels. But what I always go back to, in one of my favorite books that I don't think people talk about enough from him, which was a run, it was a Wildstorm, was Sleeper.
Yes.
I feel like that's one of the few early on, and when I was intentionally talking to friends and being like, I need to read, stuff outside of the big two, and people are like, suggesting stuff. That was one where I was like, holy crap, this is what comics can be. Like, you can take the superhero universe, other people have done in amazing ways, but Brubaker just did something with those characters that I don't know if anybody's touched those characters since. I'm sure they have, but I couldn't see it because I felt like he did such a good run. It really, Sleeper is, my favorite comics run when I think about runs in general. But
I can dig
that's for me.
Yeah,
I mean, his Captain America run also came to mind because that was just sensational. But I went with
Catwoman
Sleeper.
run. Did you read that?
I did not read Catwoman, but Gotham Central.
Yeah,
I know that was Greg Rucka, but yeah, no, I did not. I do need to get to his Catwoman run.
Most definitely, it's the best Catwoman run ever put together. Period. So, Chad, how about you? Number 3.
Number 3, I'm going again. Mine is totally DC, but I'm going to have to say Jeff Johns' JSA run. I mean, because again, reading, coming in around 0 hour, and having the JSA, original members like being de-aged and trapped in limbo, I believe, or then all of a sudden they're back, and it's like, oh, this is interesting, and but he definitely breathes a new life into those characters that seem to be very could have just been shelved.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, and then the original JSA was shelved for a number of years post-crisis, and as of course but yeah, you're totally right. The Jeff Johns iteration is has such powerful themes of generational heroism. The way that it seamlessly weaves the old and the new generations together, and really just turned that book and that team into the real cornerstone of DC, or the DC universe, I should say, in a way that the Justice League just wasn't, which is fascinating. And I could talk more about contrasting that with Morrison's JLA run, but
yeah.
There's a lot there, a lot to unpack. And Jeff Johns and his Green Lantern are just some of the best superhero comics you could possibly read. So, number 3 for me, Transmetropolitan by Warren Ellis and Derek Robertson and Rodney Ramos. Spire Jerusalem is just such a lovable bastard. You can't not root for him. The world that Ellis created was so prescient. Like, I still go back and flip through the issues and think about some of the things that he wrote about in there. And he just knocked it out of the park. And it's so smart and yet snarky, and has so much to say about journalism as an institution that it just works on every conceivable level.
I know that my brother offloaded a lot of some comics on me, and that was part of it. And as I was like, I have them, I'll just read the first couple issues, and 2:00 in the morning, I'm still next one.
No, most definitely. All right, well, John, we're back to you.
I was again trying to stay in the wheelhouse of favorite creators. one of my favorite runs of all time is the Max. That's my favorite character. Sam Keith is my favorite artist.
Hell yeah.
But I wouldn't say that story was very artistic driven, right? I still love it. I've reread it multiple times. But another person who fits in that vein, writer, artist, is Jeff Lemire. And I think of he's just one of the first writers I latched onto that leans much into the emotional side and sometimes quieter stories. And for me, his best run is Sweet Tooth, which was recently adapted, but Sweet Tooth is definitely up there. Again, about 36 issues. These, 5 or 6 great hardcovers. I recommend anybody. Wasn't quite like the show, but I still think if you liked elements of the show that came out and the characterization of these hybrid animal kids and how they're getting along in a post-apocalyptic world, it's one of the best post-apocalyptic stories I think there is.
Oh, it has so much heart.
So much.
I love Sweet Tooth.
So
I seriously doubt Jeff Lemire will ever top it, and that's not to dog any of his other work because
no. And I actually, it's honestly, I feel the same way. Like I'll get his new stuff and it'll kind of sit on the pile a while because he kind of hit the bar with Essex County was amazing. And then Sweet Tooth and then a couple other in that, the Nobody. It's like, man, he came out so hot that it's like difficult for him to meet.
Yeah.
But there's a couple guys and gals I feel like are like that.
My favorite one of his is Underwater Welder.
Dude, words out of my mouth. That is one that you could teach in a class.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is. And yeah, his art style so unique, stands out right away too. So that's a big part of it.
You
recognize him.
You see it.
Yeah.
Most definitely. All right, Chad, number 2.
I'm going to say the entire Commandy series. I mean, again, I was very late to the story on it, but because it's like, oh, it's very it took a while for Kirby's art style to grow on me. But once it did, it's like it's an interesting story. It's there's a lot to look at, and it's just a fun read. And I feel that maybe that's why, again, this is another list, but Commandy's another character that a lot of people aren't, doesn't get used very much. And when they do use him, it feels off because it's, not the original stuff.
You talk about that. Some characters, the run is just so good. They feel untouchable. There's quite a few characters. I mean, Hulk is kind of like that too, but people still find there's 3 or 4 creators.
Oh yeah, look at what Al Ewing did with Immortal Hulk.
Oh, I heard. I've got to read that. And then of course the Greg Pak stuff was amazing. And
yes,
there's been some great runs. He's one of those characters that people find there. But but other ones like Commandy, it just seems like they're just so untouchable.
Okay, so my number 2 is Hitman by Garth Ennis and not Steve Dillon. Garth Ennis and friends, because I just went blank on the artist name. Because I just had a moment there. But yeah, Hitman is brilliant from start to finish. The action is top notch. The humor is top notch. My goodness, it's got a story called Zombie Night at the Gotham Aquarium that shall never be topped. It got an angry letter from PETA sent to DC over it. Really? So you must be doing something right if you've enraged PETA. The character work is nonstop. The nods to people like John Woo or Sergio Leone are just perfect and don't feel forced. It's just and at the end of the day, considering it's a comic that starts out with Tommy Monaghan, the lead character, vomiting on Batman's feet after getting hit in the stomach. It has a lot to say.
I actually didn't even know the comic was in the DC universe. I didn't know that.
Sure as hell was.
The only thing that survived out of Bloodlines.
Yes. It's got an awful lot to say about the power and ease of violence that gunplay brings. And you might not expect that from a writer that sometimes lacks subtlety like Garth Ennis, but man, he just hits the nail on the head. And I revisit Hitman with regularity.
I'm just check that one out.
Yes, you do. All right, John, this is it. The gold medal time. What's your number one favorite run of all time?
Well, and again, and just kind of thinking of the subject, again, tried to think outside of, graphic novels that have been great. What's the run that I always think about, or when people tell me, what should a new reader read? And for me, it's Hellboy. I'm going to cheat and say just Hellboy. Mignola's universe that he created with so many amazing creators, Guy Davis and Dave Stewart and all them. Oh, I just cracked that. Is that the monster size?
It damn well is.
I just cracked mine today, and I seriously hurt my hand picking it
Yeah.
up.
That's a two-hander if ever there was one.
Even though you might be able to peek, I have the whole Mignola shelf here. Again, the BPRD, the Abe Sapien, Johann Kraus, my favorite character. There's so many great characters, so many moments. Just awesome, bizarre, supernatural, quirky. Again, I love the idea of playing with a government agency, kind of functioning in this world with supernatural stuff. And man, it's just such a great book. It ended kind of, but there's still great stories to be told in the universe.
Yeah.
So
There's
again,
one going on right now called The Crown.
Yeah. And the Sword of Hyperborea and Frankenstein New World. There's like tons of stuff they can still do, even though Hellboy's story kind of came to an end, a satisfying end for him. Just that whole run. I just love the Mignola verse in general. I there's very few books I pick up from that and don't leave completely satisfied. So I'll cheat and say the Hellboy universe.
Sweet. I love it. I love it. All right, Chad, what do you got?
Mike Grell's Green Arrow.
Oh, didn't see that coming.
Because I think I've found it at a time where I was like kind of getting burned out on superheroes, and then it's like, and I like more of the street level, human characters, and that's Mike Grell is about as street level as you can get.
Nice.
But
He's
no,
a nice guy. Remember when
Yeah.
we interviewed him and he was just like the nicest guy ever?
Working on getting him back.
Awesome. I love it. I'd love if we got him back and Gabriel Hardman in the same interview. That would be amazing because we could talk like fully about Green Arrow stuff, past and present. My number one run of all time is Preacher by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon, the late great Steve Dillon. It literally changed who I am as a person in terms of how I view religion. And it instilled some beliefs in me that about standing up for your beliefs and your friends and what's right and what's wrong that I still carry with me today. And it's funny. It's subversive and over the top at times. It's got a guy named Jesus de Sade and Hair Star, my favorite villain of all time. And it's got the Saint of Killers and a reckoning with God that has to be one of the most satisfying endings in the history of comics, in my opinion. And it's 66 issues of just pure joy. Once you start reading Preacher, you will not want to put it down until you get to the end.
Yeah, back on those off-kilter, I guess we call them indie, even though that was with Vertigo, books got a real healthy long runs.
Oh, yeah.
We may not see that ever again in the future, so you got to enjoy those.
May not. So we are a little over our time, but that's okay because we had a great show. John Westhoff, what is your final word on Drumsticks of Doom for folks? An elevator pitch, get people hyped up for this thing.
Well, like I said, if anything that we said interested you in a world where Black Sabbath was the most popular band on earth and thus, heavy metal rules the earth, jump into Drumsticks of Doom. You can jump in. This is the final arc. You can follow this link tree will lead you to all the links. We're launching the third arc. You can catch up on all issues. There will be 2 trade paperbacks once it's all said and done. And then hopefully in the future, some sort of deluxe oversized hardcover, because, you have to be a narcissist at some point. Now, all of us want to see a big collection of our books, to go with the ones I got behind me here of other people. So I'm hoping for that down the road. But again, it'll be 10 issues. You can jump into the final arc, or you can catch up if you want to. But share it out. That helps. Again, I mentioned at the beginning of the show how much algorithms squish everything. So we understand in this difficult time for a lot of people, not everyone can afford to back, but a share really goes a long way for us little guys, us small businesses trying to get the word out. So if you can't back, give it a share. We sure would appreciate it.
Awesome. Love to hear it. John Westhoff, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight and talking shop, talking comics, talking heavy metal. Chad, who do we have next week?
We have two guests on 2 nights.
Oh,
Yes. Wednesday evening, we're going to be talking with Klaus Janson.
awesome.
Wow.
Legend.
And then Thursday we are going to be talking with another Kickstarter creator, Mr. Tony Nacho, who does Super Guy.
Cool.
Yep. If you saw the our New York Comic Con wrap up, then he was on the show, so he's coming back.
We love it. And we love you all for listening and for supporting us. Here are both on the Comic Watchers show and at comic-watch.com. We do appreciate it. We do this for love of the game, not for love of money or love of clicks or anything like that. So until next time, get out there.
But we'll take your clicks.
We'll take them, but we won't love it. We'll hate ourselves and feel dirty for it. Get out there, support local art, support local music, support your local comic book store. Just get out there and do something good in the world. And until next time, we are the Comic Watchers, and this is our show. Thank you so much for listening.